In just 17 minutes, these gas-masked commandos rappel down the building into the Iranian Embassy in London. They eliminated 5 terrorists and rescued 24 hostages. And little do you realize that operation brought the SAS to the public eye for the first time, as well as the new MP5 they were using that was ignored for almost 14 years. After that broadcast, every police force and counter-terror unit on Earth wanted that gun because it was the only weapon at that time with so many genius engineering concepts that made it iconic, and it fit the modern close-quarter fighting doctrine. Starting with this delayed blowback roller that made all the rest possible. So, a round goes off. The bullet pushes out of the barrel, and Newton's second law shows up. Equal opposite reaction wants to push the shell and the bolt head back this way. But you don't want that pressure to go away too quick before the bullet leaves the barrel. It opens just a fraction of a second late. And by then the bullet is gone and the pressure is dead. So this is where the rollers act like resistors to slow down the whole process. And that gives you that delayed recoil physics. Just imagine how controllable it gets if your follow-up shots is always ahead of the recoil you felt from the first shot. But more importantly, when a gun fires, there's a small explosion inside it, and something has to hold the back of the barrel shut for a split second, or hot gas blasts into the shooter's face. In the 60s, that something was having a heavy block of steel slamming back and forth with every shot on full auto like the Uzi showing here. Just watch how much happens before the bullet ever fires, and you can feel the gun moves before the bullet even leaves the barrel. So what they want is a closed bolt design. It just means the only thing moving when you press the trigger is a light hammer striking the firing pin. The whole concept was reportedly born from an accident from the Mauser's Jurat dealing with bolt bounce in full auto, and engineers realized a non-locking roller system could work as a delay mechanism. Because surgical close-quarters fight became common, and the stake is too high when hostages are involved, and suddenly using open bolt machine guns that only know how to spray and pray is no longer the right tool for the job. The straight-line recoil design is a World War II STG innovation among the first straight-line recoil configurations. Overall, the MP5 has that gentle kick into your shoulder rather than a sudden jolt, but also not up into muzzle climb. The downside is of course more parts, you had to hand-fit some of the parts, tighter tolerances and higher costs are expected. And it also runs dirtier because combustion gas blows back into the receiver. The fluted chamber. At the moment the MP5's action starts moving, chamber pressure is still up and the brass case is swollen tight against the steel around it. Extract it now and you risk ripping the rim off or leaving a stuck or torn case. So what they came up with is the shallow longitudinal flutes cut into the chamber so that high-pressure gas bleeds forward into these grooves and gets behind the case walls, floating the case on a gas cushion so it slides instead of gripping. Every case that comes out of an MP5 has black stripes scorched down the sides where the flutes were. Shooters call them tiger stripes, and you can pick your own brass off a crowded range floor just by looking for them. These guns have even kept running with a broken extractor, because the gas is doing most of the extraction work anyway. For reloaders, this can be annoying because that scorched striped brass gives up after just a handful of reloads. MP5 family barrels use a 12 to 16 flute chamber, depending on different variants. The flutes are the reason you can shoot cheap supersonic ball all day. Without them, a roller gun at these pressures would be a jam-o-matic. Shell extraction begins the instant the bullet moves, so the delay is in the rate from the rollers, and the flutes exist only to float the case so it doesn't stick during that high-pressure window. The downside is of course dirtier if there's gas in the receiver and in your face when shooting suppressed, causing you to tear up. You don't want that in a gunfight. Stamped steel and forged gun barrel. After World War II, 3 ex-Mauser engineers needed to build precise, tougher guns cheaply and at scale. They do by inheriting lessons learned from the MG, 42, and STG on stamped construction. So the MP5's receiver starts life as flat sheet steel, pressed into shape and welded together rather than machined from a billet. The barrel is cold hammer forged and then pressed and pinned into the trunnion. The MP5 shares its DNA and manufacturing logic with the belt-fed MG 42 from World War II. In fact, the hard part was never the pressing. Instead, it's holding rifle-grade tolerances in bent sheet metal, which is exactly why MP5 cloners struggle and why hand-fitting drives cost. And HK held them so well that factories cloning this gun today still measure against that standard. So if the MP5 is so great, but why the 14-year flop? Because if this gun was such a masterpiece, why was it not getting any traction in the beginning? The MP5 hit the market in the mid-60s and spent its first 14 years as a footnote while the crude, rattling Uzi owned the planet. It was everywhere, and it was good enough. Precision is a hard sell when the customer believes a submachine gun is a spray and pray tool. But as more closer quarter fights became a thing, suddenly high-volume fire isn't going to be the tactical standard moving forward. The Uzi had a 12-year head start in actual combat, so by the time the MP5 launched, the Uzi had already fought in Suez and was about to fight in the Six-Day War. It was adopted across dozens of countries, and it was cheap. Put yourself in a procurement office in 1966. The Uzi's been fighting wars for a decade, half the world already owns it, and even HK's own country's army carries it. Now HK walks in asking way more money for a gun that does the same job on paper. Worse, submachine guns were considered spray tools for tank crews, and every military was busy switching to assault rifles anyway. So the MP5 was a precision instrument, sold into a category everyone thought was crude and dying. And the one job it was actually built for didn't exist yet. The units who'd need it hadn't been invented. The MP5 wasn't a flop because it was bad. It was just 14 years early, and actually it didn't take that many iterations or changes to get good like other guns. They pretty much nailed it near perfect on their first try without major flaws. The next one is making the gun quieter. When a normal suppressor doesn't quiet the sonic crack of a supersonic bullet, something else has to be done first. So to be truly quiet, you had to use special subsonic ammo, which is a logistics headache for Spec Ops teams. The integrated suppressor can turn supersonic bullet into subsonic with any off-the-shelf 9mm ammo by bleeding off enough gas inside of it and making it even quieter. The SD version has all these holes right at where it meets the muzzle to bleed off all the gas before the bullet goes through the baffles. Inside you have this expansion stage, plus a stamped helix/decompression stage. It's there to bleed off enough pressure that even standard supersonic ammo leaves the muzzle subsonic, so there's no sonic boom. It doesn't slow the bullet down so much as never let it go supersonic. The muzzle velocity is lowered anywhere from roughly 16% to 26%, depending on the ammunition used, ending up around 950 to 1,000 feet per second, regardless of whether the ammo was loaded supersonic. This was probably the best suppressor design back in the 70s. One rule comes with the SD though, and that the can is part of the gun. Fire it bare, and you're venting burning gas straight at your own knuckles. The trigger pack. Every agency shopping for the gun wanted different things they found useful to them. Semi-only for one, a burst limiter for another. The problem is that one weapon needed to serve many roles or agencies without redesigning the whole thing. So the idea is to use a self-contained fire control group that is the swappable polymer at lower, and it uses pins hold that whole trigger part in place. So if you want burst mode, you can just swap the parts and drop it right in. Later trigger packs even swapped the German lettering for little bullet pictograms, so an officer from any country could read the selector at a glance. So think of this as the ancestor of the modern, serialized fire control module idea, like the SIG P320 decades early. Back in the 60s, having this type of design was an engineering flex in the gun world. Sights, claws mount, and suppressor lugs. Aiming hardware on submachine guns of that period was a joke. If you dreamed of mounting a scope on the MP5, there was nowhere to bolt one on, and also there is no way you're going to keep it zeroed. So in rear sight and an H&K classic hooded post up front was the only way to aim. For adding a piece of glass, HK built a claw mount in the early 70s that clamps over the receiver, and this was decades before rails made that boringly normal. It was the one used on the G3 and HK33. As long as the clamps don't come off, mounting any optic is possible now on the MP5. And out at the muzzle sits a Three-Lug fitting that trades a flash hider for a blank adapter in 1 second flat, and there are no threads to unwind. But suppressors weren't even the plan. The Three-Lug existed for roughly 20 years before anyone built a can to mount it, and today that same fitting is the fastest suppressor mount on the planet. So basically HK future-proofed the muzzle design by accident. The mag curve, the paddle release, and the bolt slap. The first MP5 magazines were straight boxes, and they did cause jams. A 9mm case is slightly tapered, and tapered cases stacked straight keep trying to bow into a curve. So misfeed shadowed the gun through its entire first decade. Therefore, HK stopped fighting the ammunition and instead tweaked the mags to match it, and the problem basically went away overnight. The banana curve isn't for looks, if that's what you're thinking. It's just the shape of the round stacked up, and it looks like this. Behind the magwell sits a paddle release either hand can hit without breaking the firing grip, and reload speed suddenly outran everything in the class. Then there's the famous move where the bolt locks back on a notch on the cocking handle tube. You slap the cocking handle to send the bolt fully home rather than riding it to guarantee it goes into battery. It's a technique the gun's design requires, and that became a signature move. People call it the MP5 slap. All about concealment. Close protection details had a requirement no other submachine gun could meet. The gun had to stay invisible under a suit jacket, for example. So HK shrank the entire thing until the K model ended up roughly the length of your forearm, with a vertical grip planted up front, so a shooter can drive the muzzle fast and more controllable. Everything is the same, but just shorter. HK even came up a briefcase to conceal the gun inside with a trigger extender lever built into the handle, letting a bodyguard fire the gun without it ever seeing daylight. The downside is that you are just blind firing. The bolt gap. The bolt gap is the measured distance between the rear of the bolt head and the front of the bolt carrier when in battery. You check it with feeler gauges, so if it wears below minimum, you swap in a larger roller. Factory spec is a gap about the thickness of 2 sheets of paper. The problem is that because headspace and timing depend on how far the rollers wedge out, where of the rollers, locking piece or trunnion changes the geometry and therefore the timing. For the MP5, locking rollers are available in a range of plus and minus sizes to adjust bolt gap and ensure proper head spacing. Even where that spec sits is a deliberate choice. HK deliberately runs the gap near the loose end, because loose timing shrugs off dirt, and because it dumps the recoil energy into the spring. So this just means the gun is engineered to wear its cheapest parts first. But that's the tax on the whole design. A periodic feeler gauge check most owners of other guns never think about. The scalable blueprint. The MP5 didn't invent this roller system, instead it inherited it from a full-power battle rifle like the G3. HK took that one mechanism and stretched it across a whole arsenal. Rifles in 5.56, belt-fed machine guns running the same rollers on a tripod, and snipers and such. And at the very bottom of the family, shrunk down around the 9mm, and with that, you have the MP5. What changes between a belt-fed machine gun and this submachine gun is mostly the angle of one steel wedge. So when you're holding this, you're actually holding a battle rifle, but miniaturized. That's why nothing else in its class ever felt like it. And that brings us back to where we started with that Iranian Embassy raid. Because here's what the broadcast didn't show. The gun in those commandos' hands was already 14 years old, and almost nobody had wanted it. It took the Munich massacre in '72 to force countries into building hostage rescue units in the first place. And when those brand new units went shopping for a weapon precise enough to bet innocent lives on, they found exactly one. So when the UK spec ops team stormed that embassy in front of the cameras, all those years of being ignored had a sudden revive in just 17 minutes. Some believed the fame only came when it was seen on TV by millions. By the next morning, every police force on the planet wanted the gun they'd just seen. And later, licensed factories built it on 4 continents, and it went on to serve in over 40 countries. The FBI's hostage rescue team bought it. The Navy SEALs got a sea-proofed version, and after that, the gun was everywhere. Every action movie, every video game, every special forces poster. For 20 years, if a director wanted to say elite without saying a word, he just put an MP5 in the actor's hands. And here's the part that proves the design better than any spec sheet. HK tried to kill this gun themselves. In the late 90s, they launched a replacement called the UMP, a cheaper and lighter version offered in 9mm and 45. And to keep the cost down, they went back to the simple blowback system. But it was the exact brute force design the MP5 was built to escape, and people continue going back to the MP5's. And in fact, there are many guns that one way or the other has copied from the MP5, and you can watch that one here.